"Mom, I forgot to buy your ticket." My son said it with a thin smile, still holding the first-class ticket I'd paid for. $30,000 for a family vacation, yet the one left behind was the person who paid for everything. My daughter-in-law pretended to panic, leaning in. "A last-minute ticket is $3,000, and there aren't any seats near us. Just head home, okay? We'll bring you souvenirs." Her voice was sweet as honey, but the glance she slid over me was colder than steel. I stood in the middle of the airport, listening to their suitcase wheels roll farther away, blending into the boarding calls. They thought they'd just gotten rid of the agreeable old woman who always footed the bill. They didn't know that in just a few hours, when the plane touched down in paradise, they'd get a legal notice cold as stone, and that's when their dream vacation would turn into a real hell. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I don't know how long I stood there in that busy stream of people. Los Angeles International was still loud. Kids screamed when planes took off, and I stood still, like a statue in a moving crowd. The smell of coffee, the announcements, the white lights washing over the glossy tile, everything mixed into something strange and distant. Just minutes earlier, I believed I'd be enjoying Maui with my son, my daughter-in-law, and my 2 grandkids, the first real trip I'd dared to plan in years. Now all that was left was a bitter void. I swallowed the humiliation like a cold stone, trying to keep my voice steady as I told the check-in agent, "It's all right. I'll head back." She looked at me with sympathy, lips parting like she wanted to say something, then only nodded. Maybe she understood that some pain doesn't need pity. I pulled my small bag and stepped out of the line, moving toward the gate. Outside, hot wind blew across the parking area, carrying the smell of exhaust and asphalt. When the taxi pulled up, I opened the door, sat in the back seat, and said softly, "Pasadena, please." The road home felt longer than I expected. The city slid past the window buildings, signs, an endless stream of cars. My reflection on the glass. Gray hair, dark-rimmed eyes, skin lined by time. But there was something new in that look. A cool, clear, steady light. Not the image of an abandoned old woman, but of a woman about to redesign her life. When I got home, the 2-story wood house where Frank and I had lived for more than 30 years was quiet, except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock. I set my bag on a chair, took off my glasses, and sat in my husband's old armchair, the place where he read the paper every morning. On the table was our wedding photo, Frank smiling gently, and me looking up at him, eyes full of trust. I remembered what he said after helping a close friend through bankruptcy. "Kindness without offense, Carol, turns into a free buffet for other people." Back then, I just laughed. I thought he was too rigid. That in a family, love would be enough to hold everything together. But now, when my own son said he forgot the ticket, I understood. Fences aren't built from coldness. They're built from self-respect. I went to the desk by the window. In the drawer sat the familiar file, Hartwell Family Trust, 2012. It was the product of a lifetime of work the furniture company Frank and I built from nothing. It held shares, houses, savings accounts, even rental income. After Frank passed, I trusted Nathan with partial access so the boy could learn responsibility. All he learned was limitless spending. I flipped through the thick pages, my hand shaking slightly. Each page reminded me of a crack, the temporary loan he never repaid, the time Sabrina's boutique failed and she cried for help, those family dinners of fancy food that somehow billed to my address. The airport humiliation was just the last drop after years of helping out, of habit. I took a deep breath and opened the small safe behind the cabinet. The code was our wedding date, 0524. Inside, the files sat in neat stacks: passbooks, insurance contracts, property titles, the will, and a USB labeled Julia Final Draft, Julia Park. My attorney, who helped me sell the company 10 years ago, a sharp, discreet Korean-American woman. I dialed her number, my hand a little unsteady. A low, even voice answered, "Law Office of Julia Park." "Julia, it's Carol. I need your help. Urgently." There was a beat of silence, then her voice turned serious. "Is this about the family trust?" I pressed my lips together. "Yes. And it's about Nathan." We set a meeting for the next morning, but Julia didn't need much explaining. Just, they're in Hawaii, and she understood. She'd met Nathan enough to read the type, ambition wrapped in politeness, always ready with, "I just want to make you proud." I sat and listed tasks in my daughter. Leather notebook. Temporarily freeze Nathan's access to the family trust. Send the legal notice right when their plane lands. Revoke all secondary cards and the family spending limit. Compile spending evidence, statements, photos, receipts. Review assets at risk of misuse. Prepare a separate report for the financial advisor and the bank. I marked each line in red. At the last line, I paused, control family narrative. I knew Sabrina would spin the unfair mother-in-law story fast, but this time I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood. I only needed the truth. I closed the notebook and stepped into the backyard. The lemon tree Frank planted was heavy with bright fruit. I picked one, cut it in half, and breathed in the fresh, tart scent. Frank used to say, "A little sour keeps you awake." I smiled. Today, I was truly awake. That evening, I sat in the oak-paneled study, desk lamp shining over thick documents. On the desk, my phone lit. A video call from Julia. "Carol," she said, "everything's ready. I just need your confirmation. Do you want the notice sent the moment they arrive at the resort?" "Of course. I want it to be the first thing they read when they turn on their phones." Julia nodded, fingers tapping quickly. "All right. I'll send a notice to freeze the accounts and to review all inheritance rights. In the next 6 hours, they'll know the party is over." I looked out at Los Angeles at night, pools of warm light across the city. A stray cat crossed the yard, its shadow sliding like smoke. I thought of Frank, how he used to say, "When people treat your kindness like it's owed, stop. You're feeding a traitor in your own house." I exhaled softly. "I've stopped, Frank." Before bed, I took another sheet of paper and wrote a few simple lines. June 15th, the start of a new path. No longer the mother left behind, but the woman redrawing her own plans. I folded the paper and set it in the drawer. Outside, the night breeze mixed with the steady tick of the clock, slow and sure. Tomorrow, when Nathan's plane touched down in Hawaii, when they were still dreaming of blue water and cocktails, they'd open their phones and see the cold subject line from the law office, legal notice, temporary freeze of Hartwell family trust assets. They would panic, call, text, scramble, but I wouldn't answer. I spent my whole life nurturing. Now I'll spend the rest of it reclaiming ownership of myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peace. But the space after a strong wind. I sat by the window, watching moonlight glint off Frank's old pocket watch, the one he wore to contract meetings. He loved it not for the price, but because he worked extra for a month and redrew plans to afford it. Nathan knew that. And that's when I first saw the crack in his foundation. I remember that afternoon, clearly about 3 years after Frank died. Nathan came over in a new suit, hair combed just right, full of energy. "Mom, I've got a big meeting in Beverly Hills. I remember Dad's old Hamilton, the silver-faced one. Can I borrow it? It would make an impression." I paused mid-pour. His "just for a bit" sounded like the opening line to an endless string of asks. "No, Nathan," I said gently. "That's your father's keepsake, not a prop to impress people." He raised an eyebrow, his smile fading. "You're still keeping everything the same? You should learn to let go." It's just a watch. Sabrina, sitting on the sofa with her phone, chimed in. Syrupy sweet. He'd just borrow it for one evening, Mom. No one sees it at home anyway, and the client would see how successful your son is. I said nothing. I just looked at Nathan. The way he glanced at his wife and back at me told me there wasn't respect in his eyes anymore, just a practiced patience, like someone waiting for an older person to give in. I shook my head. No. That watch belongs to someone who understands the work it takes to get it. The silence after that was suffocating. Nathan set his coffee down and said nothing, but a chill slid across his mouth. Something in me cracked. After that, he came by less. Sabrina called sometimes, chirpy as a bird. Mom, I'm launching a small online boutique with handmade silk scarves. I just need a little seed money. I want to be independent, not depend on anyone. I listened, and I felt for her. I started a business in the mid-80 seconds. I knew what it meant to scrape by. So I wrote a check for $50,000, mailed it with a card, for your start. But remember, don't turn it into someone else's dream. 3 days later, at a red light on Colorado Boulevard, I saw Sabrina step out of a high-end boutique, bright orange shopping bag in hand, laughing into her phone. I recognized the logo Hermes. I stared. Through the windshield, my chest tight. The independent girl I admired was buying a designer bag with the same money borrowed to build her future. The way she lifted her chin and walked told me a few tears could buy a check. That night, I didn't scold or call. I just wrote in my notebook, not everyone cries from pain, sometimes it's from the script. But once you open your wallet, people think you opened the door, and that's exactly what happened. In the following months, I started getting family bills. Nathan asked me to cover golf club dues, premium kids' toys, intimate dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. I asked. He laughed. I'll pay you back later. It's just easier to use your card for the points. I didn't think much then. I still believed I was helping him handle work pressure. But one day, checking my account, I found nearly $8,000 gone in a month, not for convenience, but for personal purchases. I emailed him. Nathan didn't reply. Sabrina texted, I'm sorry. The restaurant must have double charged. I'll take care of it. No refund ever came, and me foolish, I let it be. Then one Sunday dinner, Nathan asked while I was setting the table, Hey Mom, our trust, is it revocable or irrevocable? I turned, surprised. Why are you asking? He shrugged. Just curious. I've been reading up on finance, and everyone says you should know your family trust. Oh, and if there's ever an early disbursement clause, let me know. If a major investment pops up, maybe we could both benefit. It sounded harmless, but the tone chilled me. He said we could both benefit, like the trust was a shared item and I was just the temporary key holder. I answered simply, that trust is for your future and the kids after I'm gone, not for pulling out bits while I'm alive. He smiled, warm as winter sun seems warm, but no heat. From then on, he kept bringing up planning for the future. Each visit came with more questions. How many shares do you hold? Who's the secondary proxy? If you get sick, who signs for you? At first I thought it was care. Now I know it was an anchor he was quietly dropping into my safe. I remembered Frank. When someone starts asking about value instead of effort, greed has already beaten reason. That line hit like a hammer on wood. I looked around the house walls, furniture, family photos, everything looked the same, but suddenly I saw the long-standing cracks I'd ignored. I stood, grabbed my knit cardigan, and stepped onto the porch. The night breeze carried a hint of jasmine. In that cool air, I heard Frank in my memory. Don't let them turn your kindness into a plan, Carol. I smiled faintly, but it didn't reach my eyes. Yes, I'd let them turn my kindness into an interest-free bank. That night I pulled out the old leather planner, the one I used for business, years ago. This time I opened a new page. At the top, in red ink, I wrote, "Organized dependency must end." Below it I listed 1. Review every help I've given over the past 3 years. 2. Detailed statements for every charge Nathan made on the secondary card. 3. Call the bank to set access limits. 4. Talk to Julia about modifying the trust. 5. Write a separate letter to the grandkids so they understand the value of independence. I stopped. The desk lamp lit my face in the window's reflection. A 67-year-old woman who had loved too much, given too easily, and was relearning the first lesson of youth, knowing how to say, enough. Outside, lemon leaves rustled, moonlight pooling on the wooden stoop. I closed my eyes, listening to the grandfather clock inside, steady, reliable like Frank's heartbeat when I lay my head on his chest. I knew that when I woke up I'd start building the fence. Not barbed wire, but an invisible fence made of respect and discipline. Because a house, no matter how good the materials, collapses if the foundation rots. And my family's foundation started cracking the day I thought I was doing what was best for my son. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. In the dark, I whispered to myself, "It's time, Carol. It's time to build the fence." The next morning, I arrived at Julia Park's office an hour early. The glass building caught the first sun, sharp and clear, the same feeling I tried to hold inside. On the 13th floor, a small gold sign read, "Park and Associates, Estate Law and Trust Management." I took a deep breath and went in. Julia met me with a small, calming smile. She was the same as the first day we met. Neat, hair in a bun, a voice so steady it slowed people down. "Coffee?" she asked. I shook my head. Coffee would make my heart race, and today I needed a steady heart to do something I never thought I would: freeze my own son's finances. Julia opened her laptop files, filled the screen. "I reviewed the trust copy you sent yesterday. Honestly, Carol, your son has fairly broad access not just to a secondary account, but to periodic distributions. He can pull funds for family expenses, which can mean anything that sounds reasonable." I stayed quiet. The word family felt sarcastic. She went on. "I recommend temporarily freezing all of Nathan's access to the Hartwell Family Trust. This won't cancel inheritance, but it will block any transactions during the review period." I nodded. "Do it now. I want everything in place the moment their plane lands in Hawaii." Julia studied me. "You want the notice to hit as they touch down?" "Yes, that's the prime window. They turn on their phones, connect to the resort Wi-Fi, and the first email they see is from your office. Not revenge, just cause and effect." Her fingers flew over the keys, voice as even as a clock hand. "I'll draft the legal notice and instruct the bank to lock all secondary cards. Also, do you want to cap the family spending limit Nathan's been using?" I gave a thin smile. "No more limits. Lock it." 10 minutes later, the screen showed every account, stock, and rental contract in Arizona and Florida, everything under the trust. Julia pointed to a line. "This is the joint investment account. Nathan can view and request dividend transfers. I'll ask the bank to suspend his request rights until further notice." I looked at the rows of numbers, once a point of pride, now like locks someone had been quietly picking. "You know," I said slowly, "I used to think if everything was clear and legal, there'd be no trouble. I was wrong. No clause is tight enough when people get loose." Julia paused, met my eyes. "Peace of mind doesn't come from anger, Carol. It comes from the right structure. When it's properly set, you'll breathe again." That made me smile a little. I'm done arguing. I'll let the consequences speak." She nodded. "That's what people choose when they've grown past anger." "No," I said, lower. "It's what you choose when you've been used so much. There's nothing left to be angry about." She printed a document and handed me a pen. "Emergency authorization." As the pen slid across the paper, I felt something strange, light but sharp, like cutting away a part of yourself to get your breath back. She gathered the papers into a leather folder. Everything will execute within 30 minutes. The bank will text you when it's done. Thank you, Julia. I'm just doing my job. And you, Carol, she softened. You're doing right by yourself. When I left, the sun was out. Standing on the sidewalk, watching cars glide by, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. Not empty, calm, restored order. I stopped by the corner cafe where Frank and I used to sit on Sunday mornings. The cappuccino still had the thick foam he liked. I set my phone on the table and waited for the confirmation. When it buzzed, I wasn't surprised, I just smiled. The screen read, "Bank alert. Your request to freeze secondary cards and Hartwell Family Trust access has been successfully processed." One short line. But it felt like the first nail driven into rotten wood, straight, firm, final. I pictured Hawaii, blazing sun, marble-floored lobby, palms swaying. Nathan steps to the desk and hands over the card. The clerk smiles, swipes, then forces a tighter smile. "I'm sorry, sir. Your card was declined." Nathan frowns, asks her to run it again. Still declined. Sabrina tries to cover with a crooked smile. I imagine them exchanging looks, worry rising, then turning to blame. Just the thought made my chest feel lighter. Not mean satisfaction, just fairness finally finding its voice. I sipped my coffee. The flavor spread through me. For the first time in years, coffee tasted like it. Should bitter, but true. That afternoon, I went home and opened my notebook. On the page after yesterday's red line, I wrote, "Not revenge, drawing boundaries." I read it over and over. Boundaries easy to say, hardest to keep in family. When your kid is small, you are their fence. When they're grown, you forget to build a fence for yourself. I stepped into the yard. Wind moved through the lemon leaves, a soft rustle. Farther back, the old wooden fence around Frank's garden had faded, a few slats warped. I ran my hand over the grain, felt the roughness of time. Tomorrow I'll fix this fence, not just the one around the yard, but the one around my heart. I went into the kitchen and took the ceramic teapot Frank had made. The jade green glaze had faded, but its shape was still the same. As I poured the hot water, the steam rose with the scent of memories. I sat down, turned on the old radio, and played "Fly Me to the Moon." Frank used to love that song. Hearing it now, it didn't make me sad anymore. It just made me feel alive, no longer tied to the fear of losing someone. When the clock struck 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Julia. "Everything's done. The legal notice has been sent to Nathan Cole's official address. He'll receive it when the plane lands." I looked at the screen glowing in the sunset light, reflecting off Frank's photo on the wall nearby. I said softly, "Do you hear that, Frank? I've begun." In that moment, I didn't feel weak or alone. I just felt at peace. Everything was settling back where it belonged: justice, love, and me. When night fell, I stepped onto the porch and watched the first stars appear. In my chest, it wasn't anger anymore. It was the steady certainty of someone who had just finished an important project. And when the phone lit up one last time with the familiar line, "Transaction hold confirmed, Hartwell Family Trust secure," I smiled and closed the phone. The opening move was complete. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The first light slipped through the curtains and into the small kitchen that still smelled faintly of pine. I brewed a pot of black tea, Frank's favorite, and set the cup on the table he once built. The oak had darkened over the years, but the surface was still smooth as day one. Next to the cup, the phone lay silent. I knew that in just a few hours, it would start ringing nonstop. Right at 10 a.m., the first text arrived. "Nathan, Mom, the bank must be confused. The card says declined. It's probably a fraud alert. Can you call for me?" I set the phone down without replying. The water simmered softly in the kettle, a faint white mist rising. I poured carefully into the cup and watched the brown stream ripple. Every movement I made was so calm it could drive someone crazy, especially people used to me rushing for them. 2 minutes later, another message lit up. "Sabrina, they won't let us. Check in. The kids are exhausted. Just fix it. Stop making this hard. They said the account holder just needs to confirm." I still didn't touch the phone. I reached over and turned on the old radio in the corner. The familiar acoustic track started, a warm baritone smoothing the room. I took a cloth and wiped the wood tabletop, slow and even strokes. The faint scent of wood oil drifted through the air, clean, simple, peaceful, the kind of peace no one can buy with a credit card. Then the calls started. At first they were spaced out every few minutes. Then they came nonstop. The ringtone rang loud, urgent, almost angry. I didn't pick up. I just counted in my head 10, then 27, then 54 calls. Each ring was another layer of lipstick peeling off the family love mask. Each new text turned another excuse into a threat. "Nathan, Mom, why are you silent? I'm standing in the lobby and people are looking at me like a criminal." "Sabrina, this is embarrassing. What are you doing? The whole resort is watching." "Nathan, do you know the kids are crying? Are you going to make them sleep at the airport?" I looked at those words and felt calmer than I expected. Not because I was cruel, but because I knew I'd been led by those exact lines before. This time, I wasn't stepping into the trap. I just recorded each message, carefully, like a craftsperson marking every joint on a blueprint. At noon, Julia sent a short email. "All secondary card lock procedures are working as expected. No one but you can reactivate. If they contact you, let me handle it." I replied with 2 words, "Thanks, Julia." By afternoon, I was in the backyard, sitting on the wooden chair Frank refinished years ago. The sun tilted gold across the new orange tree. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. "It's not bad parenting, it's bad boundaries." I set the pen down. That sentence lifted a weight. For years, I'd lived in a fear, called mother's guilt, afraid to say no, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of hurting my son's feelings. But it turned out, because I was afraid, I handed them the right to hurt me again and again. I pictured the scene at the resort. The elegant front desk, polished marble floors, the Polynesian clerk bowing slightly with a professional smile. "Sir, your card was declined." Sabrina, leaning in, hissing under her breath, "Run it again. It's probably a network error." A second time. A third. And still declined. That declined moment wasn't just a penalty, it was a mirror reflecting greed and a wake-up call. Have you ever stood by and watched someone collapse the bridge they built with sweet words? Share it with me in the comments. Every story you tell is one piece of the mirror, and when we put them together, we'll see the true face of conditional family. I could picture their faces clearly. Nathan flushed, angry and ashamed. Sabrina, trying to look composed, but her hand white-knuckled around the purse strap, her voice warbling. The kids probably already asking, "Why aren't we going to the room?" They would blame the bank, a technical glitch, but none of them would admit this was the consequence of greed. That evening, while they were likely hunting for a cheap hotel, I opened Frank's old toolbox at home. His wood chisels were still there. The wooden handles were smooth. The blades were spotted with rust. I took sandpaper and worked them, bit by bit, until the steel shone. The scrape of metal was steady, blending with the jazz on the little speaker. My hands felt unusually sure. Maybe it had been a long time since I truly did something with my hands instead of my wallet. Close to midnight, the phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look to know it was Nathan. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a video call. I watched the screen light up and his face appear sweaty, irritated airport. Lobby noise behind him. I let it ring until the call ended on its own. Then it rang again. I actually laughed. They didn't understand that silence is also an answer. Every second I stayed quiet was another second they had to face what they'd done. I turned the ringer off, set the phone face down, and poured another cup of tea. In the dark, the tea's warmth mingled with wood scent and the polish on my hands. A calm settled over me, the kind money can't buy. The next morning, Julia called. Her voice was as steady as always. "Carol, I think it's time you prepare a 3-year spending dossier. I'll compile it into a financial record in case they try to dispute anything." I stopped stirring my tea. "What do you need?" "Bank statements, transfer receipts, every expense you covered, as detailed as possible. With everything in hand, you'll have complete control." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "You'll have it. And the blueprint review will happen. Right here in my living room." Julia chuckled lightly. "I like how you call it that. A blueprint review. Very much the style of someone who builds foundations," I said. "We're not demolishing the house. We're fixing the foundation." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and went through every old transfer email. Every little thing, meals, tuition, holidays, surprise trips, all of it laid out like a map of dependence. The money wasn't what hurt most. What choked me was realizing I'd been treated like a natural resource, no feelings, never tired. I gathered all the printouts into a thick folder labeled Expenses, Hartwell Household 2021, 2024. I set it carefully on the desk beside the chisel I'd just polished. One was steel, one was paper. Both had the same job: cut out the rot. Outside, late sun poured through the window onto our wedding photo. I looked at Frank and spoke as if he was still there. "I'm doing what you told me, not out of anger, out of self-respect." The house was quiet, just the grandfather clock ticking steady, like a sure heartbeat. I closed my eyes and let that rhythm settle me. Somewhere across the ocean, they were probably curled up on hard seats in the Honolulu airport lobby, the paradise photo still undelivered. They didn't know paradise isn't blue water and expensive drinks. Paradise is sleeping well in a home you built with your own hands, no debts, no lies, no one siphoning from your trust. I closed the folder, blew out the candle on the desk, and told myself, tomorrow, the plan's open. And this time, I'm the one holding the ruler. 3 days later, the heavy pounding on my door in the late morning sounded like a hammer hitting steel. I was making tea when the cup trembled in my hand. The banging was so hard our wedding photo shook on the wall. I knew immediately the flight from Hawaiian paradise was back, and now their anger was standing at my door, no longer a flock sound in my imagination. I didn't rush. I set the kettle down, wiped my hands on a linen towel, and went to open the door. Nathan stood there, face flushed sunburn or rage. I couldn't tell. His shirt was wrinkled, collar off center, and beach sand still clung to the wheels of his suitcase. Sabrina stood behind him, sunglasses failing to hide her unease, lipstick smeared crooked. The 2 kids hid at her back, eyes wide, not understanding a thing. "We need to talk," Nathan said, voice tight, trying to stay calm while his hand crushed the suitcase handle white. I stepped aside and opened the door. "All right, come in." The air inside was cooler, but the temperature seemed to rise the moment they entered. Heat from anger, pride, and embarrassment. Sabrina took off her glasses and looked around the living room like she was stepping into a place that used to be hers and now wasn't. Nathan started immediately, no warm-up. "Do you know what I had to tell the front desk? I had to pretend it was a technical error, that you transferred the money wrong. Do you understand how people looked at me?" I poured tea, slow and steady. "Sounds rough." Sabrina cut in, sharper. "No one wanted this. We just wanted to take the kids on vacation, let them have fun. You're making us look like thieves." "Oh, really?" I set the kettle down and gave a small smile. "So it was just a trip for the kids?" Nathan exhaled hard and launched into the usual speech. "You're cruel." Why didn't you call the bank and reopen the card? I just needed one phone call. You humiliated us in front of everyone. For what? A few mistaken charges? I let them talk. No interruptions, no reactions. Each sentence dropped like small stones on a still pond. I looked out the window, the sun on the lemon trees, pale gold, gentle. Sabrina's voice wobbled. The kids had to sleep at the airport, do you know that? We had no room, no car. I had to borrow money from a friend to get flights back. How can you not feel guilty? I turned to her, calm. If we're talking about guilt, maybe start with using someone else's money without asking. Silence pooled for a few seconds, thick and heavy. I heard the grandfather clock tick. On the other side of the sofa, Julia Park was already seated, as planned. They hadn't noticed her. Julia sat composed, legs crossed, a navy ribbon around the leather folder on her lap. When Nathan drew breath to speak again, she said gently, her tone as steady as a knock from reason, "Excuse me, but before we continue, I believe Mrs. Hartwell has a few things to present. My name is Julia Park, her attorney." Nathan froze. "An attorney?" "Yes. I'm here to make sure this conversation stays clear and honest." Sabrina swallowed and glanced around. "My God, you called a lawyer to the house?" I looked straight at her. "Yes, I did. Because I've called on trust too many times and no one answered." The room changed immediately, dense like air before a storm. Julia placed the leather folder on the walnut coffee table, the one I built from Frank's leftover boards. She untied the ribbon and opened it. Inside were neatly stacked documents, each tabbed and numbered. Bills, statements, transfers all printed from the bank, nothing added or taken away. Julia slid the first stack toward me. "You may present." I nodded, took the top page, and laid it out. Transaction dated February 15th. $50,000 for Sabrina's boutique investment. 3 days later, $7,800 at Hermes Beverly Hills. April 18th, $12,000 for a golf club membership. That same month, $3,400 for a family celebration dinner at Del March. I wasn't invited to that dinner. Nathan's grip tightened on the suitcase. "Mom," I raised a hand. "Don't. I'm not done." I turned to the second stack, voice even, unraised. Last August, Sabrina used my secondary card to buy business class tickets to Miami for a so-called company retreat. During that time, I discovered her online boutique had already closed. Sabrina went pale. Mom, I'm not calling you a liar." I cut in. "I'm stating facts, like a blueprint. Measure right, cut right, keep emotions out." Julia opened the third set and slid it toward Nathan. "These are your access statements for the Hartwell Family Trust. You withdrew funds quarterly, each time around $9,000 to $12,000 marked family expenses. Over the past 3 years, that's nearly $120,000. Nathan's face drained. He stared at me. "What is this, Mom? You tracked every dollar I spent?" I held his gaze and spoke softly, clearly. "No, son. The bank tracked it. I'm just reading it." The room went silent. Outside, the leaves rustled, a whispery sound. In that quiet, I could hear my heartbeat, not from fear, but relief. I set the stack down and kept going. For 3 years, I asked for nothing, but every dollar I gave, you treated as your due. You didn't ask, "How are you, Mom?" You asked, "Does the trust have an early disbursement clause?" And when you humiliated me at the airport, you still thought it was someone else's fault. Sabrina sank into a chair, hands shaking on her bag strap, her lipstick smudged. "We just wanted a break." Julia folded her hands. "A break with someone else's money is dependency, not rest." I looked at her, then at them, my voice dropping, each word like a nail driven into wood. "There are no gaps in a blueprint measured with a steel square, Nathan. Frank taught me, when the foundation cracks, you cut out the rot, you don't patch it. That's what I'm doing today." Nathan lowered his head, silent. Sabrina bit her lip. Tears fell, but no one spoke. I poured more tea, slid the cup toward Julia, not looking at the other two. Drink. It's getting cold. Julia took a small sip, then closed the folder with a gentle final motion. No more words were needed. The truth had done its job. I sat in my own home and felt the quiet spread like a lake after a storm. 3 years, $120,000, and countless lies flattened into a few sheets of paper. I looked at the numbers and didn't feel angry, just sorry. Sorry for a son who could have chosen honesty, but chose greed. Outside, the sunlight softened. Kids' laughter drifted from next door, clear, carefree, unmarked. It made me think of when Nathan was little, running in the yard, shouting, "Mom, look at me!" with the purest voice. Now, between the grown man sitting before me and that child, the only thing left in common was a name. I took a deep breath and ran my hand along the table's edge. The wood was cool. The grain ran straight like a pulse line. Any foundation that hopes to hold must lose its cotter. Cracks. And I finally was willing to do it. I pushed the thick folder forward, my fingers skimming the pages like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. Not on flesh, but on a slow, hidden illness, unlimited withdrawal as a habit. "Let's begin," I said, voice even, never raised. "I'll mark each point clearly, the way you mark the rotten spots in a foundation." Julia started the recorder, her voice professional. "Today's meeting between Mrs. Carol Hartwell and Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Sabrina Cole, witnessed by the representing attorney." I nodded and opened the first page. $50,000, the boutique bailout. I looked up at Sabrina. 3 days later, you bought a Hermes bag for $7,800. I don't know what the boutique sells, but it clearly doesn't sell honesty. Sabrina's mouth tightened. She started to respond, but Julia had already opened her laptop and pulled up a color print. Sabrina, grinning, holding the bright orange bag, captioned, "Finally, treating myself. Number new beginnings." The room dipped. Afternoon light cut across her face, half lit, half shadow, like a portrait of guilt done up in makeup. I turned the page. $10,000 a deposit on a new car. Nathan said it was to make school drop-offs easier. Which road to school is so long it requires a luxury SUV? Nathan blew out a breath, sharp. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. I'm investing in our future, our family. Image matters in my line of work." I looked at him for a long moment, not angry, just cold. "You're talking about image, Nathan? What image is it when a man uses his mother's money to buy a car and then brags about being self-made?" He went quiet. I flipped another page. $5,000 your property tax. That house isn't in my name, isn't part of any estate, and isn't a home I've even visited. Yet every year, I quietly paid the tax because I thought it was helping you keep a roof over your head. Turns out, I was shoring up the foundation of ingratitude. Sabrina inhaled, lips trembling. Nathan looked down, avoiding my eyes. I kept going, each line slicing through the excuses. And here a long list of family dinners. Del Mar, the Ocean Pearl, Prime House, all places where a steak runs $300 a plate. Each bill noted, "Family dinner, thanks, Mom." I paused and looked at them. Funny thing is, I can't recall sitting at any of those tables. A soft click, Julia marking the timestamp in the recording. The room's air thickened. The grandfather clock sounded slow and heavy. That rhythm reminded me of a heartbeat, steady, not rushed, each beat a warning. "Do you see?" Julia said gently. "Every one of these transactions has the same theme. No limits, no oversight, no sense of gratitude." I nodded, my voice lower. "That's not an oversight. It's a habit. A dangerous one, withdrawals made with arrogance." Nathan lifted his head, trying to stay composed, but his voice warped. "What are you doing, Mom?" "Every dollar had a reason. I didn't steal." I'm trying to build a future for my family. You have to understand that. I looked him straight in the eye. You're building a house with bricks borrowed from my foundation, Nathan. And I'm the one paying for its slow collapse. Sabrina turned to him, voice shaking. I told you, she wouldn't let this go. She looked at me truly afraid for the first time that day. The soft mother story she'd polished for relatives didn't fit the scene anymore. I turned the last page. Heavy paper with a blue border, the Hartwell Family Trust document. I set it down, voice deep. And this, I said slowly, is the real target. Not the vacation, not the small stuff. The trust. Silence pinned the room. Julia squared the stack, her eyes flicking to me the look of someone who knows the next part won't be easy to hear. I tapped the walnut tabletop with a fingertip. The sound carried in the quiet, like a heartbeat before surgery. You asked me over and over, is the trust revocable or irrevocable? Is there an early disbursement clause? I thought you were curious about finance. Now it's clear you weren't curious. You were probing. Nathan stiffened. So you're accusing your own son? I held his gaze, my voice steady. No, Nathan, I'm not accusing anymore. I know. A long silence. Sabrina's head bowed. Her hand clenched the torn strap of her bag until it went white. Julia set her pen down, gentle but final. Mrs. Hartwell, she said, there's one more document. I turned to Julia and nodded. Go ahead. But before she could lift the folder, I stopped her. I looked at my son, the child I once held when he took his first steps, now sitting there with a stranger's flat face. I spoke slowly, each word heavy as lead. Nathan, before we look at that, do me a favor and call this by its name. He said nothing. I repeated, name it. Don't call it a mistake. Don't call it a misunderstanding. Call it what it is. Sabrina whispered to him. Don't say anything. I heard it clearly. I just smiled. Do you see, Nathan? People only tell you to stay quiet when they know you're about to tell the truth. No one answered. I leaned back and looked at Frank's photo on the wall. He once told me something I only now fully understand. A house doesn't fall because of storms. It falls when people carve out the foundation from the inside. My house, my trust, had been carved for 3 years. And today, I finally started to stop the chisel. Julia stayed seated, but her eyes followed Nathan's every movement. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, his shoulders drawing in. He took a deep breath, then spoke softly, his voice rough like wind slipping through a crack in a door. I just wanted you to trust me. I shook my head. No, Nathan. You wanted me to believe I would never dare say no, and that's where you were wrong. Outside the window, the wind picked up. The orange leaves rustled, throwing shifting shadows across the floor. Pale gold light fell onto the table, glinting off the stack of papers like a thin blade. I looked to Julia. Now open that document. She nodded, opened the leather folder, and took out a small envelope sealed with red wax. When the Hartwell seal caught the light, I heard Sabrina's breath hitch. I didn't know what was inside, only that what was about to be read would leave no room for pretense. The room stayed silent. The grandfather clock kept time tick, tock, tick, tock, 1 beat, 2 beats, 3. I exhaled, slowly, like a craftsperson finishing the first cut of the most necessary surgery of my life. Julia broke the red wax with a small silver letter opener. Its blade, flashing under the lamp, she pulled out a thin set of pages clipped with a brass fastener. I recognized the federal court logo in the top right corner, an authorized extraction, indisputable. These are materials the court allowed us to recover from internal email, Julia said, her voice even, neutral. Sent. June 10th, 10:47 p.m. From nathan.coley@hartwellconsulting.com to sabrina.coley@icloud.com. She glanced up at us, then read, Subject: Hawaii Old Lady Payout Plan. The air in the room snapped tight, like the sound of glass cracking. A chill crept over my skin. Julia lowered her eyes and continued, "The idea is to take Mom to Hawaii, let her relax, have a few drinks, then gently bring up signing for an early disbursement. Just say it's to support my work and that I'll pay it back later. Once she softens, we can present the paperwork. If it doesn't work, at least we'll get a decent vacation out of it. 30,000 is just the bait. Emotional. Investment. Don't waste this opportunity." Julia stopped, folded the page, and her voice went low. "I don't need to explain anything further." For a moment, no one breathed. Sabrina let out a small, dry sob caught between the fear of being exposed and the fear of being abandoned. Nathan's face went so pale I could see faint blue veins beneath his skin. It reminded me of hospital walls, cold places where people wait for bad news and have no strength left to pretend. No excuse could save them now. Every misunderstanding crumbled like a loose facade in the first strong wind of the season. Each word in the email was a screw. Each line, the real blueprint of a scheme they had tried to hide. Nathan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He just sat there, frozen, staring blankly at the page lying square in the center of the table. Sabrina reached toward the stack, but Julia stopped her gentle, firm. "I'm sorry. This is evidence. No one touches it." I looked at them, calmer than I had ever been. For years I'd imagined myself raging, slamming the table, screaming, "Why?" But now that every curtain had fallen, I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth was loud enough. I closed the folder and left the email in the middle of the table, neat as a construction sign. Illegal structure. Work stopped. No one spoke. Only the grandfather clock kept its steady knock, like a carpenter driving the last nail into the coffin of a broken trust. I stood, slowly, and walked around the table. "I used to think family meant the one place where you didn't need defenses," I said, my voice low but steady. "But maybe I was wrong. A house doesn't fall because of storms, it falls because someone digs out the foundation from underneath." Sabrina bowed her head, her hands clenching until they shook. She stammered, "Mom, I didn't. I've heard enough." I cut in, gentle but final. "The most painful part isn't that you lied, it's that you assumed I'd never find out." I went to the window and tugged the curtain. Afternoon light slid across the garden, a thin gleam on the glass. It was so quiet I could hear a leaf land on the porch. I turned back to the two people who had once been my flesh and blood, now just two figures standing before the collapse of the structure they'd built out of deception. Nathan jumped to his feet, his chair clattering over. "I never meant to hurt you. It was just a plan." I finished for him. "Written by your own hand, signed by you. Sent from your company email. Don't deny it, Nathan. There are only two choices now. Admit it or keep digging the hole you made." I didn't raise my voice, but each word drove in like a nail through the last layer of paint on the dutiful sun mask. Sabrina's eyes darted, searching for a way out toward the door, toward Julia, back to me. Fear flashed, unmistakable. I didn't throw them out. I didn't need to. The truth owned this house now, and it was the one inviting them to leave. Nathan sagged back into the chair, hands clutching his head. Sabrina pulled a tissue, wiped at smeared lipstick, then looked at her husband as if to scold him, but the words were gone. Between them, the email lay still, a mirror reflecting what they didn't want to see. Greed isn't a mistake, it's a habit, fed by someone else's indulgence. I walked quietly to the door. Each step on the wood floor sounded soft and even. When my hand closed on the doorknob, Nathan whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." I didn't turn around. "Don't apologize to me," I said. "Apologize to yourself for becoming someone I no longer recognize." The door swung open and afternoon light poured in gentle and honest. Nathan and Sabrina stepped out, the way people do after a storm, unaware they were soaked long before they felt the rain. I watched them descend the steps, the suitcase wheels, rasped over the dry gravel, rough and broken. Then the door closed behind them. Click. That sound wasn't anger. It was the snip of a pair of shears cutting the cord that had been tied around my neck for years, the cord of guilt, fear, and the belief that being a mother means endless forgiveness. The air in the house lifted. Julia was still there, calmly gathering the documents. When she looked up, her smile was gentle and deep. "Would you like me to keep protecting or begin rebuilding?" I looked at her, exhaled, and answered, "Rebuild. I don't want to live in a house where I'm just patching old cracks. I want to set a new foundation, one that no longer mixes family with exploitation." Julia nodded, her eyes warm but sharp. "That's a choice made by someone starting over, not someone running away." I smiled, lighter, as if a heavy beam had been lifted off my chest. I spent my life keeping a roof over other people's heads. Now it's time to keep it for myself. She packed the papers carefully into her case. Before leaving, Julia set a hand on my shoulder. "Today, you didn't lose a family. You left behind the rot." The door closed behind her, and I was alone in the living room. Late sunlight stretched across the glass and painted a long band of brightness on the floor, the light of a beginning. I sat in the chair Frank had made and felt the smooth grain under my palm. The faint scent of tea lingered, and somewhere the smell of oranges drifted in from the yard. I looked around the room and, for the first time in years, felt truly safe. No more demand bells, no more family emergency calls. Just me and a kind of gentle quiet, like the moment after the last storm rolls away. Outside, the sun slipped behind the hills. Gold touched the edge of the curtain, making it glow like a ribbon of silk. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and spoke softly, like to Frank, like to myself. This house is finally standing again. 2 days after Julia left, the house settled into a strange calm. No ringing phone, no echoes of anger or apology, only wind threading through the window frames and the light scent of linseed oil in the living room. I brewed a pot of Earl Grey and sat at the table Frank had built, watching light slide across the wood, the brown grain looping like the years we lived, simple, sturdy, honest. Julia stopped by that morning with her chestnut briefcase, her face clear and composed like an architect stepping into a home about to be restored. She looked around and said, "You know, Carol, some doors will open to the same old wind no matter how many locks you change. Sometimes, the best way to protect a house isn't reinforcement, it's a new blueprint." I chuckled. "Are you talking about the law or my life?" Julia lifted a shoulder. "Both." That sentence quieted me. A new blueprint, it sounded simple, but for me it touched something deeper than law, the meaning of legacy. I didn't want to fix old hinges. I wanted to replace the plan. That afternoon, I pulled out an old album from the cabinet, the one with photos from when Frank and I had a tiny woodworking shop in Ohio. In one picture, Frank stood beside the first table we ever sold, his face glowing under a warm lamp. The shop was no bigger than a garage, the smell of fresh wood and polish bound up with the scent of youth. Frank used to say, "What's most valuable to a craftsperson isn't the tool, it's skill and discipline. Money without character is just sawdust on the floor." I brushed the photo, my throat tight. Maybe it was time to live his part again, the part I had buried under checks and blind generosity. That evening, scrolling through my contacts, I stopped at a name, Aria Monroe, my niece, my late sister's daughter. Aria was in her final year of interior design at the University of Rhode Island. We hadn't talked in a long time, but I remembered her once saying at a family gathering that her project was spaces for older adults where light and materials bring peace, not pity. I called. Her voice came bright and full of energy. "Aunt Carol! Oh my gosh, I can't believe you called. How are you?" "I'm well, Aria. I wanted to hear about your project." Her tone turned eager. I'm finalizing a community center by the coast for older adults. I want sustainable wood materials that breathe with the weather, warm and honest. Light will filter through skylights, so, each morning, the sun moves like a living clock. I want it to make them feel like themselves. As she spoke, I heard Frank in her care, her belief that wood has a soul when the craftsperson does. I said softly. Frank, your uncle taught me this. The most important part of any build is the part you can't see. Arya laughed. The foundation, right? I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. No, the character of the craftsperson. Foundations crack. A good craftsperson knows how to rebuild. A hush on the line, then Arya said quietly, Auntie, I want to truly learn that, not just on paper. Her words caught fire in me. In that moment, the idea came together as clearly as a finished plan. The Hartwell Family Trust would no longer exist. I would turn it into a foundation, something that actually created value. After the call, I sat a long time at my desk, looking at Frank's photo. I won't let our work live only on inheritance paper, I whispered. The next morning, I called Julia. I want to convert the entire trust into a foundation. Julia paused, then her eyes lit. Are you sure? This isn't a name change, it's a change of legal purpose. I'm sure. I want my money to be a doorway, not a window to show off. Julia smiled and nodded. I understand. Then let's draft the new plan. We sketched it together. New name, Carol Hartwell Foundation. Mission, 4-year. Scholarships for older women, over 50, seeking retraining in interior design, fine woodworking, and sustainable construction. Vision, turn so-called old skills into new value, helping them rebuild their lives just as I'm doing. I handwrote a note beneath. It's never too late to pick up the hammer again. Julia read it and smiled. You write better than a lawyer. No, I said. I've just split enough boards to know how to set the next one straight. We worked through details until near noon. I added, I want Arya Monroe to serve as the first executive director after she graduates. Julia jotted it down. Reason? I looked out the window at sunlight on the polished floor. Because she understands the value of light and honesty, the two things every build needs most. That afternoon, I called Arya again. I owe Frank a promise, and you're going to help me keep it. I told her the whole plan. She was quiet, then choked up. Auntie, I don't know what to say except thank you. Uncle Frank would be so proud. Don't thank me, I said with a smile. Build it solid. This isn't my money, it's the legacy of honest hands. That night I stayed at my desk, editing every line of the draft. With each keystroke, I heard the old sounds, saw, plane, chisel. I imagined this foundation as a new house, not fancy, but with 100 doors opening for women who thought their lives were closed. Before turning off the light, I wrote at the corner of the last page, Promise to Frank, turn money into doors, not windows to show off. Asterisk, asterisk. I set the pen down and looked at the line I'd written. Outside, moonlight silvered the desk where I could still feel Frank's warmth in the wood. I smiled. At last, I wasn't patching an old legacy. I was drafting a new one no one could withdraw from, only draw inspiration to rebuild themselves. 3 weeks after I spoke with Arya, the thick Hartwell family trust file sat on Julia's desk. She sat straight, glasses low on her nose, morning light slicing across the office like a line dividing past and present. Ready, Carol? Julia asked. I nodded, more than ever. She placed 2 files before me, one labeled Dissolution Hartwell Family Trust. The other, on thick paper with a jade green border, read Articles of Incorporation, Carol Hartwell Foundation. I looked at the 2 titles side by side, an ending, a beginning. Oddly, both felt like peace. Julia walked me through each step. First, will legally dissolve the Hartwell Family Trust. I've notified relevant parties and confirmed that no beneficiary is eligible to contest. Next, all assets transferred to the new foundation real estate, investment accounts, and intellectual property rights from your former furniture company. She paused, met my eyes. Once you sign, the Hartwell Family Trust is officially ended. I tightened my grip on the pen. Its tip scraped the paper lightly, like a saw on tight grain. When I finished, I set the pen down and felt an invisible weight drop from my shoulders. "It's done," Julia said softly. "And now you'll bring something new into the world." She opened the second file and handed me the first page of the bylaws. The first line read, "Carol Hartwell Foundation, a nonprofit established to provide training and retraining scholarships for women over 45 in interior design, woodworking, and sustainable construction. All programs will be run on principles of transparency, respect, and professional discipline." I read slowly. Then I signed. And on a quiet morning in September, a new chapter was born from the ashes of disappointment. Julia continued listing the provisions. Independent oversight, a 3-member review board with no blood ties to me. Legal restriction, anyone who has exploited family assets or is linked to a breach of personal trust is permanently barred from any benefit. When she read that line, she paused to watch my reaction. I only nodded. Keep it. No softening. Part of me wanted to be merciful, but another part, the part that had learned the cost of blind kindness, knew leniency shouldn't outrun justice. After the meeting, I sold a rental home in Santa Rosa, the one I'd planned to keep for the next generation. I understood now that the next generation wasn't people with my last name. It was people who needed a beginning. The sale became the seed money for the fund. Julia called it the seed fund. I called it the second trunk. We chose 3 partner schools for the first scholarships: Rhode Island School of Design, where Aria studies, California College of the Arts, Savannah College of Art and Design. I insisted on clear terms. Funds cover tuition, tools, and essential living costs only. No gifts, no perks. I told Julia, I want every dollar of this foundation to hear hammers, saws, and sandpaper. If it doesn't ring in the shop, it's going the wrong way. Julia smiled and made a note. I'll use that exact line on the website. Once the paperwork was done, Julia advised a quiet launch, no press conference, just internal notes to those who needed to know. I agreed. We drafted a short letter to our old network in the furniture world, the people who worked with Frank and me when we were young. I wrote, "If you've ever loved wood, smelled the polish, understood the worth of a straight cut, I hope you'll come back this time not to design for clients, but to design the future for women who want to begin again." Within a week, more than 20 people replied, volunteering to mentor the first cohort. One wrote, "Frank taught me to measure 3 times and cut once. I'll teach them that." I read the letters and smiled through tears. At the same time, Julia helped me set up an ethics committee. I kept the honorary chair, no salary, no vote. I wanted the foundation to outlast me, which meant it had to stand without me. Aria, now acting executive director, sent me the first-year plan, fundraising strategy, social impact metrics, partnerships with eco-friendly wood manufacturers. In the plan was a chart I loved, concentric circles. In the center, learner, next ring, mentor, outer ring, community renewed. Aria added, no one walks alone. We're all connected by wood strong, flexible, warm. I reread that line and felt my heart settle the way it does when my hand runs over a perfectly planed surface. One morning, the local paper, the Sonoma Weekly, invited me to an interview about the 67-year-old woman turning personal assets into a training fund for older women. Julia asked, "Do you want to do it? It's a good communications moment." I smiled. No, I want to pour the footings first. A house with a half-finished foundation and a bright sign only draws the curious, not the craftspeople. Julia nodded. That's exactly something a woodworker would say. When the timeline settled, Aria sent me the first recruitment poster, bold letters across a white sheet. 12 scholarships for those beginning again after 45. Below, a small tagline, "No one is too old to learn how to build something beautiful again." I looked up. Outside, afternoon sun washed the backyard. I heard a hammer tapping somewhere, maybe next door, maybe in my memory. Wood striking wood, round and warm. I closed my eyes and pictured opening day. 12 women walking into class, pens in hand, eyes shy and bright. They would learn to measure, cut, join, to feel the right smoothness of a tabletop, to know that beauty lies not only in the product but in a craftsperson's belief in herself. I smiled. The house in my heart, once filled with arguments, silence, and betrayal, was being rebuilt. Not with demands or apologies, but with hammers, saws, and sandpaper. To me, those sounds are the finest music in life, the music of people learning to begin again, as I once did. The first message from Nathan arrived a week after the press began mentioning the foundation. It wasn't an apology or a request to meet just a hollow line. "Mom, I understand. Thank you for still keeping the kids on the teen scholarship list." I read it and set the phone down. I didn't reply. Because when people truly understand, they don't need to write it. 3 days later, Sabrina sent a long email titled, "For the Kids." Her tone was softer than ever. They were trying to start over. She had recognized the mistakes of youth, and Liam and Ava miss Grandma. At the end, she added one wavering line. "If you could help a little so we can get more stable, we promise we won't let you down." I wasn't angry, and I didn't mock her. My heart felt flat and calm, like the wooden tabletop I polish every morning. I forwarded the email to Julia. She replied briefly, "All future communication must go through legal representation." That was enough. Family issues aren't solved with envelopes of cash, only with clear boundaries. I drafted a short summary myself. Boundary summary, as Julia suggested, just over half a page, in large print. 1. Any meeting with Nathan and Sabrina will only occur with a family counselor present. 2. Absolutely no discussion of finances. And 3. Liam and Ava are free to join Foundation community activities, but they do not represent the Hartwell family. I signed at the bottom, dated it, and filed the printout. Not to threaten, but to remind myself, peace also needs discipline. A month later, the Foundation held its first teen workshop theme, Learning to Stand Tall with Your Own Hands. I sent a separate invite to Liam and Ava, not through their parents. They both accepted. On the first day, I watched from a distance in the shop. Liam's hands shook, holding a hand plane, and Ava kept measuring, the wood off by half an inch. The instructor smiled and said, "It's okay, just measure again, like everyone else." They looked at each other, then bent down and kept going. No complaining, no quitting. I watched with my throat tight. Maybe what broke in one generation is being welded back together in the next. That evening, Aria video called from the studio, her face smudged with paint but glowing. "Auntie, the first workshop was a success. The kids even want to make extra chairs for the community room." I smiled. "Fine, so long as they measure, cut, and take responsibility themselves." Aria held up the new Foundation logo sketch, a padlock opening, its shackle shaped into a door with light coming through. "I think it should be this. Everyone has their own lock sometimes. No one opens it for you. You learn to open it from the inside." I went quiet for a few seconds. It was simple and unexpectedly beautiful. "That works, Aria. You understand the meaning better than any designer." The next morning, I went back to my routine. Brew tea, open the window, and polish the table Frank gave me on our wedding day. With every pass of the cloth, I remembered him setting it down in our first house. "Red oak," Frank used to say, "wood that won't split because it knows how to flex with the seasons." I laughed back then. "Are you talking about the table or about us?" he said. "Both." Now, each morning I wipe the table like a small healing ritual. Every sheen across the grain reminds me that what lasts isn't what never broke, it's what knows how to spring back. I also learned a new skill, the art of staying silent during a false fire. Before, the moment Nathan said, "Mom, it's urgent," I'd rush to open the safe. Not anymore. Julia taught me a good line. If they light a fire to summon rescue, let them find their own hose. At first it was hard. A mother's instinct pushes you to step in. But slowly, I learned to respirius, stay still. Because sometimes, kindness without control is just throwing more wood on a fire held by the wrong hands. In October, the foundation opened scholarship applications. Aria sent me the first list. 48 applicants. Women 46, 53, even one who was 71. One wrote in her statement, "I used to be a nurse. Now I want to make wooden chairs for a nursing home. I want the elders to sit on something with a soul." My eyes stung when I finished. I messaged Aria. "Keep this file. She's the first person I want to meet." Amid the new joys, there were afternoons when I stared at the empty yard. Places where Nathan used to wash the car, days when Sabrina still cooked dinner, not to hurt, but to remember that pain once lived here, too. One afternoon, Julia came by with the completed first-year tax file. She said the foundation was running well, and a few more schools had reached out to partner. I asked, "Do I need to give remarks at the announcement?" Julia smiled. "No, they just want you to attend. Being there is enough." I nodded, looking out the window. I've made enough noise for one life. I'll let actions speak now. That night, I wrote a letter to Frank. My pen slid gently across the page under the warm desk lamp. "Dear Frank, I've frozen the spigot. No one can turn it anymore unless it's with real work. But I've opened a new stream for women who were told they're past their time. I think you'd smile, because our money has finally gone back to what it should be, a tool, not a chain. Liam and Ava are well. Aria's doing great, she has your eyes, bright and steady. I know if you were here, you'd build a beautiful table for the foundation. But it's okay, I'll make it myself. And this time, I won't be afraid of scratches." I folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer with Frank's small handsaw. The next morning, I booked a ticket to Hawaii. Not a family trip, no luxury resort, no suitcase stuffed with clothes. Just a tote bag, a few notebooks, and a small wood-carving kit. At the counter, the agent asked, "Are you traveling alone?" I smiled. Yes, this time, truly alone. The flight left at sunrise. The cloud layer below slowly turned pale pink. I leaned back and closed my eyes. In my headphones there wasn't music, just a recording of ocean waves, steady, low, distant. I thought about the last time, same airport, same direction, but full of humiliation. This time, I carried peace. As the plane began its descent, the blue of the Pacific spread wide, sparkling, endless, asking for nothing, only inviting you to look. I took a long breath. The air was salty but sweet. The sound of waves, like a long exhale my heart had waited for. Peace, it turns out, has a sound. For me, it was the ocean whispering, "Now live, Carol." On my first morning in Hawaii, I woke before sunrise. The sea was still hazy with dawn, small waves, trailing each other like the earth's breathing. I took the worn leather notebook I've carried since the foundation took shape and walked barefoot on the sand. No noise, no appointments, just salt, wind, and quiet. I sat and opened the notebook. The first page was blank, so white it made me want to write something clear, not for anyone else, but for myself. I wrote the title, 10 Rules for Kindness with Fences. Then, line by line, the words took shape under a hand that trembled a little in the sea breeze. 1. Kindness isn't a wallet left open, it's sturdy wood that holds weight. 2. Helping someone once is sharing. Helping them forever takes away their ability to stand. 3. Being endlessly generous to the irresponsible is enabling injustice. 4. When someone treats you like a supply line instead of a person, shut off the valve. 5. Boundaries don't kill love. They teach love to show respect. Axers. 6. Don't feed the fear of being disliked with money. 7. No one gets to call it. Selfish when you choose your peace. 8. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone keep hurting you. 9. Loneliness is sometimes the platform where peace boards the train. 1. 0. Kindness needs gates, locks, and a keeper, and that keeper is me. I looked at the 10 lines and breathed in. Wind lifted the page and let it fall, like the sea tapping in agreement. I smiled. I wasn't writing to blame anyone anymore. I was freeing myself from years of being a slave to the label selfless mother. I whispered, Carol, thank you for finally saying enough. When the sun rose over the horizon and turned each wave gold, a text pinged in my bag, an unknown number. I opened it, just a photo of a resort bar tab. Under it, a short message. Just wanted you to be happy. S. I looked at the transaction code and recognized the resort from last year, the place where the Hawaii Old Lady payout plan was written. I let out a small laugh, no bitterness, no sadness, the kind of laugh you make when an old song plays and you realize you don't cry to it anymore. I typed one line, then deleted it. No words needed now. I closed my phone and looked at the ocean. Joy, I murmured, doesn't come from a cocktail someone wants me to sign for. It comes from the calm of knowing no one else controls my hands. That afternoon, I called Aria. The wind was loud, and on her end I could hear chisels and hammers from the foundation's shop. Auntie, Aria shouted, we're prototyping new study desks for the community shop. I think we should add another fun category for women 50 plus doing hand woodworking. They just requested a new class, former nurses, accountants, seamstresses. My heart picked up. Exactly, Aria. I was going to say this. Not just scholarships, let's build a community woodshop, a place to learn, make, and sell. A place where their hands touch real wood, not just paperwork. Aria laughed. I'll draft the tool list. Then compact saws, handheld drills, leather gloves, and safety locks. For mentors, I'll invite 2 of Frank's old shop guys. They're eager. Thank you, I said. What you're doing is opening the door I once closed. I hung up, full of gratitude. Something struck me. When you give people a trade, no one needs to ask you for money. I was giving them what I had lost the power to stand on their own hands. That evening, I went back to my hotel room. Moonlight spilled through the window, drawing curved bands across the floor like ripples. I opened my notebook and wrote a few more lines for the Foundation's upcoming opening talk. Title: It's Never Too Late to Begin Again. I wrote, Don't think 50 is a stopping point. It's when you have enough experience to know what you want to build, and enough loss to understand the value of every nail driven straight. If your heart still beats and your hands still tremble with excitement, you can begin, again with your own hammer. I wrote until the room lights dimmed, leaving only moonlight and the sound of the sea. The next morning, I walked the beach. Waves hit the shore in sets, then slipped back, leaving small driftwood pieces behind. A long, dark piece lay a few steps away. I picked it up. The grain was worn but intact, the surface strangely smooth. I wiped it with my sleeve, cold and heavy at first, then warming in my palm. I knew exactly what I'd do with it. I'll make you a frame, Frank, I whispered. Not big, not fancy, just enough to hold our photo in the shop when you were 30 and I was 28. when you still called me the keeper of the plans. A strong gust pushed my hair back. Sunlight flashed on the water. The waves followed each other, no crowding, no grabbing, each knowing where its edge ended, then turning back. I suddenly understood. The sea, more than anyone, knows what a boundary is. It doesn't stop out of fear, it stops. Because if it doesn't, it breaks itself. That afternoon, I sat on the hotel balcony with the driftwood in hand, sunlight pouring over the small table. I took the little carving knife from my kit and trimmed slowly. The smell of damp wood and salt mixed together, pulling up memories of the old shop and Frank whistling on winter mornings. I carved a small line at the bottom edge. We built again. We did rebuild not just the house, not just the foundation, but a life. At sunset, I stood and took one last look at the ocean before heading in. The sun burned red, reflecting long, bright bands on the water like polished boards. I said softly, mostly to myself, life is like woodworking. Measure, cut, toss the warped, keep the straight. Most of all, know when to put the knife down. I smiled, lifted the unfinished frame, and walked back to the hotel. My steps pressed into the sand, then the waves erased them. But I knew, like any beautiful trace, it doesn't need to last to be remembered. Inside me, the sea kept speaking, the same familiar rhythm. Keep your boundaries, Carol. Because real love is like the ocean, it holds you, but it doesn't swallow you. On the day we announced the Carol Hartwell Foundation, the California sky was clear and bright. Sunlight fell like thin gold threads over the small garden in front of the community center, once Frank's old woodshop, now a hall. I wore a simple gray-blue linen dress, no jewelry, just the silver bracelet. Frank gave me a small symbol of beginnings and honesty. The first 12 scholarship recipients sat in the front row, their eyes shining like freshly oiled wood. One had just divorced after 30 years. One had been laid off at 53. One was widowed. A few had thought they were too late. But today, they were here not to beg for opportunity, but to make it. I stepped up to the lectern and looked around the plain room lit by real sunlight. You know, I began, my voice a little shaky. The wedding table Frank made me is still in my house, and it's at that table that I read an email titled Hawaii Old Lady Payout Plan. A small ripple of laughter, wry, not cruel. The sound of people who'd been dismissed and were taking back their voice. I smiled. I thought legacy was something you leave to people. I've learned real legacy is what you leave in people, the belief that no matter how many times you're knocked down, you can rebuild yourself, and this time, build stronger. I told them about cracks in my own foundation, about Frank, about lessons from kindness without fences, and about learning the hardest skill of all, saying no without guilt. When I finished, Aria took the stage and presented her design, a woodcraft center for older women. The model was raw pine, light passed through windows and thin walls, air and wood blended like a soft song. Nothing is more beautiful than light being allowed to pass through, Aria said. I hope this place is the light for those who thought they'd gone dark. The room went still, then filled with applause. My throat tightened, not from pride, but from knowing Frank's dream continued not through assets but through meaning. Julia came over and shook my hand. From defense to a new architecture you did it, she said. I smiled. Honestly, Julia, I didn't rebuild anything. I just opened the door. The good was already outside, waiting to step in. The ceremony ended with a gentle acoustic set by one of the new students. I sat in the back row and looked around, feeling peace spread. No luxury, no banners, no pricey flowers, just wood, light, and laughter. I knew this was the new home for my legacy. When the room had mostly cleared, I checked my phone. An email from Nathan. 7 words, "It's good that you're okay, N." I looked at it for a long time, then typed back, "I'm okay." The door is open to responsibility, not to demands. I hit send. No, waiting for a reply. No need. That night, I went home and hung the driftwood frame from Hawaii on the wall, right above Frank's wedding table. Inside, it was a photo of us from 1982, two people smiling in a dusty shop, his hand resting on a fresh board. Beneath the frame, I carved a small line into a red oak strip. "Keep the square true," Frank's old phrase. 3 simple words, but the way I want to live. I sat, poured tea, and watched the light bounce off the tabletop. No more meaningless charges, no more demanding calls, no more silence heavy with guilt. Just calm, the one asset no one can steal. Aria texted, "Auntie, the shop got its first order 20 picture frames from reclaimed wood. We'll engrave each craftswoman's name on her piece." Warmth filled my chest. The best part of starting over isn't fixing old mistakes, it's creating chances for others not to repeat them. I turned off the lights, leaving only the glow from the wooden frame. The room filled with the scent of wood and tea, the simple smell Frank called the scent of time lived the right way. I looked out the window. Moonlight lay over the stone path to the foundation shop. I whispered, "The door is open, Frank." Not for anyone to flood in, but for light to enter first. If you've listened this far, your heart probably has a small scratch too, just enough to teach you to build a fence around your kindness. I'd love to know where you're listening from, and how you've held boundaries for love, for kindness, or for your own peace. Share in the comments. No need to write a lot, just be real. Maybe your story will reach someone else who's trying to find the courage to say, "Enough." And if my story made you smile, reminded you that dignity isn't granted by anyone, please like, subscribe, and stick with me, Carol Hartwell, so we can keep telling stories of resilience, of people who lost much but didn't lose themselves. Thank you for listening with your whole heart. In this noisy world, your presence is the best gift you could give me today. And if you can, remember, don't let anyone else hold the keys to your peaceful home. Keep them in your hand and open the door only for the light.